All right, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are going deep on something I think we all care about. Can we actually create our own happiness?
Hmm. Very interesting question.
We've got a lot of research, notes, studies, all about the science of what makes us happy. If you are the type of person who wants to understand the science without all the big words and stuff, you are in the right place.
Yes.
What we're going to do today is unpack all the scientific insights into what makes us happy, and more importantly, give you some evidence-based, practical ways to be happier. So what do you think? Are we ready to dive in?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's a question that's fascinated people, since the beginning of time. But now we actually have, science starting to back up, what actually creates happiness.
Okay, so let's unpack the concept of happiness. It's got to be more than just like, winning the lottery or getting a promotion, right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
got to be different types of happiness, right?
Exactly. So researchers often talk about two main types. The first one is called hedonic happiness.
Hedonic. Okay.
Yeah. So think of this as the happiness that comes from pleasure, enjoyment, those immediate feel-good moments.
Right.
So it could be anything from, eating a delicious meal, hanging out with friends, laughing, experiencing something new and exciting. It's often tied to these sensory experiences, things that are external to us.
Okay, so this is kind of that happiness that we seek in the moment.
Exactly. Yeah, the short term.
Short term. So what's the other one?
So the other one is called eudaimonic happiness.
Nah.
And this is a much deeper type of happiness. It's really about meaning and purpose.
Okay.
So this comes from things like, personal growth, contributing to something bigger than yourself, feeling connected to others, to the world around you. So it's less about that fleeting pleasure and more about a sustained sense of fulfillment. Living a life that's truly aligned with your values.
Okay.
So it's really interesting because they're both important and they both feed into each other.
I was just going to say that. I feel like you can't really have one without the other, right? Like you need
Yeah.
to have some of that hedonistic
Yeah.
happiness, and then that feeds into the eudaimonic, right?
Exactly.
They build on each other. And what's really cool is that they both can be increased
Mm.
with effort. So it's not like we're just stuck with however much happiness we have, we can actually grow it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the exciting part.
So how does neuroplasticity play into this? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. So neuroplasticity is like this, groundbreaking discovery in neuroscience because it really helps us understand how we can influence our own happiness and well-being.
Okay.
Essentially, it's this incredible ability of the brain to reorganize itself by forming these new connections.
Mm.
So, a lot of people think like, okay, our brain is, we're born with a certain brain and that's it. But throughout our lives, it actually adapts, it changes. And it does this based on our experiences, our learning, even our thoughts and emotions.
Wow. So if our brain's constantly rewiring itself, how does that play into happiness? Like, how can we use this?
So when we repeatedly, do activities, we have thought patterns that are associated with positive emotions, we're actually strengthening the neural pathways in our brain that support those feelings. So it's like, learning a new skill, right? The more you practice it, the stronger those connections become, the easier it is to perform that skill. It's the same with happiness. When you practice, things like gratitude, mindfulness, you're making it easier for your brain to experience those things, happiness and resilience. And it's also interesting because, when you're doing these things, you're releasing all these neurochemicals, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin.
Yeah, feel-good chemicals.
Exactly.
The ones that make us feel good.
Which, they make you feel good in the moment, but they're also telling your brain, like, hey, this is important.
Right.
Pay attention, rewire yourself around these activities.
So we're actually, every time we do something good, we're training our brain to do more good things.
Exactly.
To feel better.
Exactly.
And it becomes kind of a loop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is why, all these strategies we're going to be talking about, it's not just like, oh, this is what your grandma told you. There's science behind this.
Right.
And that's really exciting, I think, because it gives us, solid evidence for how we can take control of our happiness and well-being.
It takes the mystery out of it.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, I can actually do something about this.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm not just, stuck with whatever I have.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about how happiness is more than one thing.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing. It's got multiple facets, and it's not a mystery. We can actually do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things we can do right now?
So one that's really powerful it's kind of surprising how impactful it is gratitude.
Gratitude.
Yeah.
Oh,
So studies have shown that, when people regularly focus on the good things in their lives, appreciate those things, their happiness levels go up. Stress and anxiety goes down. And there was this really fascinating study where people had to write gratitude letters. And, their happiness levels were still higher months after.
wow. So it's not like just a, a quick fix.
Yeah.
It's a long-term effect.
Exactly.
Okay, so what does that look like in our daily lives?
So it can be as simple as, taking a few minutes every day to just think about what you're grateful for.
Okay.
Um, some people find it helpful to actually keep a gratitude journal, so they actually write it down. 3 to 5 things they're grateful for each day. And it could be big things, it could be small things. The sun shining, you had a really good cup of coffee, a friend was really supportive. Just the act of recognizing and acknowledging those good things can make a difference.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. What else?
Another one that I think most people know, but it's always worth repeating, is exercise.
Okay, we know exercise is good for our bodies, but it's also good for our minds.
Right, exactly. So we think about the physical benefits, which are huge, but the impact on our mental and emotional state is really significant. So there's tons of research showing this link between exercise and good mood, better mood, and even there's some studies that show exercise can be as effective as medication for treating, mild to moderate depression.
Really?
Yeah.
That's incredible. What's going on in our brains when we exercise that makes us feel so good?
So there's a few things. So first of all, we release endorphins when we exercise, and these are our natural painkillers and mood boosters.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond that. Exercise actually has a positive impact on other neurochemicals as well. So serotonin, dopamine, again, regulating mood, feelings of pleasure. When you exercise, you feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
You're achieving goals. It reduces stress. And all of this adds up to feeling better. And, it doesn't have to be like, marathon running. Even moderate exercise, going for a walk, dancing, gardening, all of this can make a difference.
Yeah, just move.
Just move.
Okay, so we've got gratitude, we've got exercise. What else?
This one is so crucial.
All right.
Good quality sleep.
Sleep.
Yeah. I mean, we all know, if we have a bad night's sleep, you just feel off.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But the link between sleep and happiness is really, really profound.
Okay.
There's a lot of research that shows actually when you don't sleep enough, chronically, you're much more likely to develop mood disorders like anxiety and depression.
It throws your whole body off. What's happening when we sleep that helps us so much?
So while you're sleeping, your brain is busy. It's consolidating memories, it's regulating your emotions, it's clearing out all these byproducts. And if you don't sleep enough, you interrupt all of these processes.
Right.
So then you have, trouble controlling your emotions. You might be more negative. You can't really experience those positive emotions as easily.
You're just not yourself.
Exactly. And then when you do get enough sleep, your brain can do its thing.
Yeah.
You can manage stress better. You can maintain a more balanced mood, and you can experience those happy moments more easily. And so there's a lot of simple things you can do, create a good sleep schedule, have a nice routine before bed, optimize your sleep environment. All those things can really help.
It's really investing in your well-being, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you get good sleep.
Absolutely.
It's not just about, resting your body. It's resting your mind as well.
Exactly. It's fundamental.
Okay, so we've got gratitude, exercise, and sleep. What else?
All right. Another one that's super important is our social connections.
Social connections.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that.
Certainly, we're social creatures.
We're not meant to be alone.
Exactly. So, those relationships we have, they give us support, a sense of belonging, purpose. There's a ton of research showing that people with these strong social networks are just happier and healthier.
It makes sense.
And there's actually this really interesting study called the Harvard Study of Adult Development.
Okay.
It's a really long-term study.
Wow.
And they basically found that close relationships are one of the biggest factors for well-being.
Over and over.
Over and over throughout your entire life.
Yeah, it's powerful. So it's not just about, having 5,000 friends on Facebook.
Wow.
I mean, it's about quality.
Exactly. It's really about those deep connections.
Yeah.
Having those few people you can really rely on.
Yeah.
Share your ups and downs, support each other, understand each other. That's so much more important than just having, a ton of superficial connections.
Right.
And investing in those relationships, communicating, doing activities together, just spending time together, being present.
Right.
That's huge for happiness.
I think it's great how these things are all they seem so simple.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to, climb Mount Everest or something
Exactly.
to feel happier. It's really these fundamental things, these basic things in our lives that we can just make small changes to.
Yeah, and that's one of the key takeaways is that we often think like, oh, I need to do these huge things to be happier. But really, those small, consistent changes are what makes the biggest difference over time.
It's like that saying, right? Like a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You
Exactly.
just got to take that first step.
Yeah, and it's like, like compound interest.
Yeah.
You start small, but over time it really builds up.
And it doesn't feel as overwhelming.
Exactly.
Like, oh, I just got to do this one little thing today,
Yeah.
not, change my entire life.
Yeah.
What are some examples of these small changes we can make?
So, thinking back to what we talked about, it could be, just taking 5 minutes in the morning to think about what you're grateful for.
Right.
Going for a 15-minute walk at lunch, making a point to have a real conversation with someone you care about in the evening, doing some mindful breathing before bed to sleep better.
Yeah.
These are all, small, manageable things.
Yeah.
But if you do them consistently, it really reinforces those pathways in the brain.
Right.
And it slowly shifts your baseline happiness up. It's
Right.
like you're building a foundation,
Yeah.
brick by brick.
It takes the pressure off, right? It's like, okay,
Exactly.
I don't have to be, over the moon happy every day.
Exactly.
I just got to make these small changes.
Yeah.
And be consistent.
And be consistent.
That's the key.
That's the key. And remember, some days you won't feel like it.
Right.
But even if you just do a little bit, it's still contributing to that overall goal.
You're still building that foundation.
Exactly.
You're still, adding to that compound interest.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about, external things, right?
Yeah.
But it also seems like our mindset plays a big role.
Absolutely. And one of the, I guess you could say, internal factors that makes a big difference is optimism.
Optimism. Now, sometimes when people hear that, they're like, come on,
Yeah.
be more optimistic. It sounds a bit cliche. What does science actually say about that?
So optimism isn't about, ignoring problems. It's not about pretending everything's perfect.
Mhm.
It's really about having that positive outlook and believing in your ability to cope with those challenges.
Mm.
So optimistic people, they tend to see negative events as temporary. It's not the end of the world. It's just this one thing. It's not, affecting everything in their life. And they also believe that, positive outcomes are possible and they're more likely to take action to make those happen. So they have this kind of proactive, resilient approach to life.
So they're not just like, sitting back and waiting for good things to happen.
Exactly.
They're like, I'm going to go out and make this good thing happen.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so how can we, if you're not a naturally optimistic person, how can you actually become more optimistic?
So one really good technique is to challenge those negative thought patterns that we all have. So when you notice you're dwelling on something negative, really examine it.
Okay.
Is it based on facts?
Right.
Is it just an assumption? Can you think about it in a more positive light?
Right.
Reframe it. Reframe it, exactly. And also, practicing positive self-talk.
Oh, yeah.
Focusing on your strengths, your past successes, all of that can slowly shift your mindset.
So it's really retraining your brain
Yeah.
to think more positively.
Exactly.
Okay. You also mentioned self-compassion.
Yeah.
How does that play into all this?
So this is a really big one. It's treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer a good friend, when you're struggling, when you make a mistake, when things are tough.
Right.
It's realizing that we're all imperfect.
Yeah.
It's normal to make mistakes. And it's choosing to be kind to yourself rather than, beating yourself up.
Yeah, we're often our own worst critics, aren't we?
Absolutely, yeah. And, there's a lot of research showing that self-compassion is linked to greater happiness.
Okay.
Lower anxiety, lower depression, and you're much more resilient in the face of, hard times.
Giving yourself a break.
Exactly.
Okay. So it sounds like we've got a lot of really great tools here.
Yeah.
We can actually influence our happiness. It's not just this passive thing we're waiting for.
Yeah, exactly. It's a combination of things. So we've got the gratitude, the exercise, prioritizing good sleep, nurturing those social connections, and cultivating that positive, optimistic and self-compassionate mindset.
Yeah, it's a holistic approach.
It is, yeah. It's not about, achieving this constant state of euphoria, that's not really realistic.
Right.
It's about creating this foundation for a more fulfilling and resilient life, so you can weather the storms.
So I guess the big takeaway for everyone listening is you've got this. You can actually do something about it.
Exactly.
It's not a mystery.
Yeah.
There are steps you can take. You can, use the science to your advantage.
Exactly. Yeah. And, the great thing is you can start today.
Right.
Just pick one thing
Yeah.
that resonates with you and just start doing it.
Yeah. Even a small amount.
Even a small amount,
You
consistently.
just build from there.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, what's going to be your one thing, as you go about your day? Think about that. Which one of these things that we talk about do you want to try? And maybe even how you can, personalize it.
Yeah.
Make it your own. What works best for you, for your life.
It's a journey.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And thanks for joining us today on The Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.